The Janot model was created by a child psychologist named Haim Janot. He was born in Tel Aviv, Israel in 1922. Then he moved to the United States as a teenager, and he studied at Columbia University, where he pursued his doctoral degree in 1952 in clinical psychology. He was a resident psychologist featured on the Today Show with Barbara Walters. He talks about how you should treat all children like party guests or like house guests, treat them with more respect, and I'll be going more into that example later. He also published 3 very successful books in his lifetime about child psychology. Between Parent and Child was his first book at 1965, Between Parent and Teenager in 1967, and Teacher and Child in 1972. So what is the Janot model? The Janot model highlights interpersonal communication and encourages a humanitarian classroom environment. It emphasizes teachers as role models and also language as an important tool in demonstrating respect. So when you talk to students, use language that you would use with somebody that you respect or care about, like a house guest. You don't punish them or you don't ridicule them, you don't say mean things, and then you can in turn expect that level of respect back. So this is organized into 3 basic tenets. The first one being teachers must seek harmonious communication. The second one, teachers must invite cooperation. And the third being teachers must promote discipline instead of punishment. So on the right side, it says, what do we say to a guest who forgets her umbrella? Do we run after her and say, what is the matter with you? Every time you come to visit, you forget something. You're 44 years old. Will you never learn? I bet you'd forget your head if it wasn't attached to your shoulders. That's not what we say to a guest. We just say, here's your umbrella, Alice, without adding scatterbrain. Parents need to learn to respond to their children as they do their guests. And that is a direct quote from Haim Janot in his book, Between Parent and Child. How does the Janot model work? Here are some teaching tips. So the first one is praise effort instead of personality traits. It really shows how much time you put into your project versus you are a naturally gifted writer. So making sure that you are praising how much time, how much effort a student puts into their work is more important than praising their inherent talent in whatever subject. Correction is necessary, but it should not be lingered on. Focus on the learning. So with this, it's really just simple. You correct the behavior, you correct whatever is going on in the classroom, and you move on. You don't linger on it. You don't embarrass the student. Third tip, punishment causes children to feel like they have paid for their misbehavior and might cause them to do it again. Janot suggests using guidance instead of criticism or punishment as a method for discipline. And the last tip here says behavior is discussed in your classroom as a separate entity from the student. So what does that mean? Say Bobby has a messy locker. You don't say, you can never clean up your locker. It's always messy. Just say something simple like, I see a messy locker, without attaching Bobby to that locker. And right here is a picture of Between Parent and Child, which has sold more than 5 million copies.
So now we're going to take a look at the research that we've done on Janot's model. And for this, we have used 3 different articles to learn more about this model. So the first article is Revisiting Janot's Congruent Communication After 30 Years. The second article is The Significance of Congruent Communication in Effective Classroom Management. And the last article, which we'll look at again for the case study, is Beat the Drum Lightly, a reflection on Janot. So I've grouped the takeaways into positive takeaways and negative takeaways. So for the positive takeaways, each of the articles really seem to stress the same positive things from this model. So the first being academic growth. So kind of the heart of Janot's model is a positive relationship and atmosphere within the classroom. So it stresses that relationship between students and teachers. And when those students do trust and cooperate with their teacher, that tends to lead to more appropriate behavior, which in turn leads to academic achievement. So a big positive here is that using this model really should allow for academic growth within the classroom. The second positive takeaway was better discipline. So this model focuses on doing away with punishment and focusing on really constructive discipline here. Um, so students in turn feel less intimidated, less threatened, and it actually creates a learning moment for the students. So in one of the articles, it mentioned, instead of telling a student that they did something wrong, the teacher had a classroom discussion about the behavior itself and, didn't point fingers at the student, really just made an open conversation. And in doing so, it seemed like the students really understood, and what they vocalized showed that they knew how to better handle the situation the next time. Another article mentioned the best thing we can do for discipline is just talk politely to the students. So instead of, getting our feelings involved and maybe getting their feelings involved, just politely describe the situation itself. And really a big thing with Janot is to, not criticize the student itself, to really keep in mind the situation that occurs. And a third positive takeaway was classroom diversity. So in doing congruent communication, what each of these researchers saw is that it promotes cultural responsiveness within the classroom. So the focus of congruent communication is making sure that we're communicating in a way that keeps feelings in mind and tries to not make students feel uncomfortable. Again, speaking to situations versus maybe the way a student acts in particular. And in doing so, we're actually keeping in mind maybe cultural differences and not targeting one's cultural, profile in their actions that they do. So really a big positive takeaway here is that if done correctly, this model should promote the diversity in a classroom. Some of the negative takeaways. So this first one requires consistency. And I would say this probably goes for all models of discipline in a classroom or management within a classroom. But in this model in particular, if there isn't consistency, it's hard for the students to really feel like the relationship with the teacher is genuine, that they can really trust the teacher. And so without that consistency, it's very hard for this model to be beneficial. The whole basis of this model is that positive atmosphere and relationship. And if the students aren't getting that consistency, that can lead to some confusion for them. Another one that all three of the articles stressed is the learning curve. So this is not a model that we can just pick up immediately and start using, because it really kind of goes to the the way we act, the way we speak, and the way we teach. And sometimes that needs to be relearned. So, if we are under the approach that we are the authoritative figure in a room, we might be speaking to the students in a way that actually is hurting their feelings without us even noticing. So in that regard, really, we have to re-educate ourselves on, using I statements instead of you statements, and using that same discussion with the students. The other learning curve that the articles discussed is in a culturally diverse classroom. So if we are teaching to a diverse classroom, which is more and more the case these days, we really need to educate ourselves on the different cultures and backgrounds that are within our classroom. And if we haven't done that, it's going to be difficult to impossible to actually establish the congruent communication. And the third negative takeaway here is it's not well defined. So there's really no strict process. There's no steps that need to be taken. It's all kind of abstract ideas or just ways that we should be speaking. Some of the articles really focused on this, that it's better when used to complement other models of classroom management. It's not really a standalone model to take on in the classroom, but it can be beneficial when it's partnered up with maybe some more well defined models. So, the overall reaction that I would say from the researchers on Janot's model is a positive one. They've all agreed that if used consistently, it really has a positive atmosphere that it creates for the classroom, which in turn leads to positive relationships between teacher and students, and it can promote the classroom diversity. So, now we're going to take a look at a case study on Janot's model.
The Janat case study. Edith Roebuck is former lead teacher in K-12 music and director of music in early childhood for the Boston University/Chelsea School Partnership in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Ms. Roebuck was asked to observe and provide professional development to teachers teaching music and who taught in pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade classrooms. She published her findings in the 2002 article, Beat the Drum Lightly, Reflections on Janat. She focused on the tale of a brief conversation between a music teacher and 15 four-year-olds in a pre-kindergarten class. The conversation occurred when the students learned about percussion instruments such as a drum. The students were instructed to be patient and wait to take their turn playing their instruments, then allow another student to play. When the students completed the activity, the teacher engaged in the conversation regarding how to play their instruments in the next musical activity. The word conversation is emphasized to illustrate the atmosphere for an exchange of ideas and opinions rather than the teacher telling the children what to do. The teacher told a student who played the drum that the instrument can make a very loud sound, and then it is hard to hear the other instruments. That is the problem. What can we do to hear all the instruments? The drummer replied that he will play the instrument softly. Within the context of Janat, this experience encouraged the student to formulate their own plan to solve the problem rather than be told. The objective of the lesson was a musical one, learning about instruments and being a musician. However, related to every content-driven objective is the overarching objective of supporting the developing child. Now, within the context of Janat, he said, what counts most in adult-child communication is the quality of the process. Talk to the situation, not to the personality, and character is the cardinal principle of communication. I firmly believe, at least from my particular perspective and my experience, that this can help because it allows this child, or at least the student, to feel as though their uh, student-teacher relationship is not one way, that the student has a voice and the teacher wants to hear the voice. And it allows the student to formulate their own ideas and articulate it. Two more quotes. One is, I have come to a frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. Now, that is a very enlightening shock when it came to me as a teacher, because I realized very fast that I'm the one who sets the tempo. I set the tone. And if I come off as very positive, then the student will respond positively. And if I don't, then they won't. And it's incredibly important to understand that being a teacher, you are as much a student as your own students. You're learning from them as they learn from you. And the next quote is, real life students do not always act according to a lesson plan, and real life teacher training does not always prepare teachers to deal with live children in the classroom. Now, when it comes to this particular quote, it resonates with me, and I believe it is relevant to the case study in general because no one knows what's really going to happen every time a teacher walks into a classroom. All they know is that the teacher has a lesson plan and he or she will attempt to do their best to help the student better understand the subject matter through the use of the lesson plan. Now, in the case study, the teacher wanted to help the students learn musical instruments, but she also helped the student with understanding how to better formulate their own thoughts and articulate a complete sentence due to the fact that these were 4-year-olds. And it was a little bit of socialization training, a little bit of critical thinking, and a little bit of motor skills, and it was just a multifaceted lesson, and just understanding what is involved in playing instruments and how that is connected to thinking about how to make the overall tapestry of sounds that those children were making better. And a solution from the child was to just play the drums more softly. And it was a solution that the teacher was satisfied with. And that was a lesson that maybe the teacher didn't have when they were in college or took teaching courses. You know, when you're in in the classroom, uh, you're a little bit like on the football field, and you can have the plays and you can have the best team possible, but it's just you and that football, and you have to do your best to make it to the goalpost. And if that goalpost is ensuring that a student understands certain things, then that is the goalpost. And the real lesson in this quote and in this case study is that real life is the classroom. You know, the classroom is just a space for real life to occur, but real life is the thing where the teachers and the students learn from each other. Thank you.